Well, welcome back to the Yahowah vlog. For those of you who may be interested and notice that we're currently meandering back and forth between our Rainbow studio downstairs and now our library studio up here on the pool deck. It's because the weather has been quite frightful outside here in the Caribbean, and our ocean studio would be a bit problematic until the storminess dies a bit down. We're happy to have the blustery conditions and the rain, which often accompanies it, because we live on an island and our water is what falls on our roof, and our electricity is what hits our solar panels. We are very self-sufficient in this kind of an environment, and so we become fans of the weather. But that is what's causing us not to go back outside currently into the ocean studio. Here in our library studio, we were continuing the story of the last Mashal, the last word picture. And even though we have finished our presentation of Mashal, which is a Proverb 31, it directed our attention to what had caused the intervention, because it is the story of a surrogate mother visiting with her son, and her son is the Son of God, the Messiah and King, David. It led us to the injury that he had perpetrated on himself and others that required that intervention, and that was found in 2 Samuel 11 and 12, and we were at the last statement that we're going to review in this regard in the 12th chapter before we move on to one of the most painful songs ever written. While I am a celebrant of the 89th Mizmowr, I consider it to be the greatest song ever written. I'm here to tell you that the 51st may be the worst. And it reflects Dowd's mindset at the time. And I think it's essential that we share it so that you know how bad this situation had become. And it is with great respect for our king, because he did get his act together. He recovered. He served as the Passover lamb in 33 CE. He carried our guilt into Sheol, deposited it there, never to be seen again. He is the greatest person who's ever lived, but he was far from perfect. And, that is really part of the message of this story. There are two things, actually there's many things, that over the last 24 and a half years that my wife and I have been able to deduce that no one had seen previously. And among them is that Dowd served as the Passover lamb in 33 CE, and he made it abundantly clear that that was going to be the case, and we will find it reinforced throughout the 116th Mizmowr, which we will review after the 51st. That is, I think, the greatest discovery in human history, pursuant to God, because it negates the three Abrahamic religions, the religions of almost 6 billion people today, proving that they are entirely wrong, and it demonstrates that our Savior, the Messiah, the chosen one, the very Son of God, is David. And it is profoundly important relative to our standing with God and to his people's standing, Israel's standing with God. But this other thing is, quite recently, we have learned that God has no interest in perfection. So when somebody is saying you have to be a perfect Passover lamb, that's utter nonsense. It's the word that is one of the most frequently misrepresented in the whole of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. Tamym doesn't mean perfect. It means to complete the job, to do what needs to be done to finish the mission that you have been assigned. And Dowd did that. He recovered in his relationship with Yahowah, and then proceeded to fulfill the single most important mission ever afforded any of us, and that is the fulfillment of Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym in year 4000 Yah, making him the ideal candidate to do these very things, because he did what needed to be done. And so it is recognizing this, and also recognizing that even as we went through 2 Samuel 11 and 12, and consider that horrible letter that Dowd not only wrote, but made the man he intended to assassinate carry, all for the lust of a woman. Even though we read it because we needed to deal with it, we never run from anything in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. God clearly detailed it and shared it graphically for our understanding. We also understand that in context, Dowd still remains the most extraordinary of all men. Prior to this time, beginning at 8 years of age and concluding at 54 or 56 years of age, Dowd lived the most important 48 years that any human would ever experience. He was the man for the job. He defended his people. He wrote marvelous psalms, and he just was an exemplar of everything that God was striving to achieve with us. The fact that he ultimately faltered is is something we have to recognize and deal with. But who of us have lived 48 years in the spotlight, doing the most difficult job in the world, representing Yahowah, the most highly rejected and demeaned job in the world, representing God? And he did it for 48 years. That's longer than anyone else. That's 8 years longer than Moshe. In fact, Moshe actually gave up in a year and just went through the paces after that time. It's extraordinary what the man did, and we need to keep this in context. So Nathan replied to Dowd, "Nevertheless, Yahowah, Abar, will one day pass over your Chata'ath, guilt, through your purifying offering. You will never die." Samuel listened to God, 2 Samuel 12:13. If you pay attention, with this being stated by Yahowah regarding Dowd, then you must acknowledge that there is no credibility in Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. Christianity was the first of those three religions to develop. And if you read the book of Acts, you have both Peter and Paul claiming that Dowd was dead. And because he was dead, they felt at liberty to steal every promise Yahowah made about him, including his titles, Son of God, Messiah and King, even Savior, and give them to their construct, their product of identity theft, Jesus. But the very fact that it's acknowledged here, you will never die, means that they lied. Now, I know they lied, and I make that point every time we go downstairs to the Rainbow Studio, because using Paul's and Peter's own words, I rip them to shreds and prove that there is nothing that they say that is rational or true. But here it's emphatic. You will never die. Now, with Dowd continuing to live, it means that he is the returning Messiah and King, just as Yahowah said, which means that there is no basis for Judaism that claims that an unknown Messiah will return to them, when in fact it's Dowd. And of course, Christianity would not exist without Judaism, because the Quran's religiosity is all a result of rabbis selling Muhammad Talmud readings, which he then twisted to suit his situation, and claimed that they were given to him from Allah as opposed to the rabbis. You will never die. It is the line that affirms that I'm right, that Dowd was the one who returned in 33 CE, year 4000 Yad, to fulfill Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym, and that it was his soul that carried our guilt into Sheol, only return to the Father in Shamayim, and that it is Dowd. who will return to be our king in 2033. As for Abar, for those who do not know, Abar, according to Yahowah, as he introduced Passover to us, Pesach, he told us that Abar was indeed the verbal root of Passover. It means to pass over. And therefore Abar served to define Passover. And Yahweh was saying, nevertheless, Yahweh, Abar, will pass over one day your Chata'ath, guilt, through your purifying offering, which again reaffirms that Dowd will resolve his guilt and ours by fulfilling Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym. All we really have to do is pay attention to the words, to listen to our God and respond intelligently. So yes, I appreciate Yahweh pointing us to the resolution and the restoration of the relationship through Abar, which, as I have mentioned but want to underscore, is the actionable root of Pesach, Passover, which is the first day of Chag Matzah. Passover is the doorway to life. So now all that need be accomplished is to get our king back on his feet after having fallen so precipitously, so that he can answer this call and serve as that door. So there is another lesson that I want to reinforce. While Dowd had demonstrated that he was not a perfect lamb by religious standards, it should now be blatantly obvious that Yahweh defines Tamym differently than do men. You see, just as we know that God was speaking of fulfilling Pesach by interjecting Abar as its verbal root and then presenting it as the answer to death, Tamym, the word so carelessly rendered perfect, is an actionable root. Its actionable root is tamam. It has one as well. We can deduce its meaning, like Pesach, meaning to pass over, by looking at its actionable root. And it speaks of finishing, not of being flawless, of completing the mission. Doesn't say anything about standing idly by so as to never incur any guilt. It doesn't say anything to be a myth that people can say, well, my myth is perfect. I created my myth just perfect. No, there's no such thing as a perfect man. There's no such thing as a perfect animal. Perfection is not even something God is interested in, because if we were perfect, we would not be interesting. If we were perfect, we could never grow. We could never learn anything. We could never experience anything new. And we could never prove that if mistaken, we could learn from our errors and grow as a result. And we could get up once fallen and again demonstrate that God can depend upon us. So therefore, Dowd became the Tamym lamb when he re-engaged, completing his calling by fulfilling Chag Matzah. When his Bashar body was sacrificed as the lamb, he opened the door to eternal life for himself, in addition to the entire covenant family. And then on Matsah, when his nefesh soul carried our guilt into Sheol to make us innocent before God, he was also carrying and offloading his own. The resolution that Yahweh had established in the Torah applied to the Bikuwrym, the firstborn son, as well as to all other Bikuwrym, firstborn children. God didn't change the rules. He simply applied them. Then working with Dowd, Yahweh enabled the benefits. That is the reason that Dowd would never die. He is the first of firstborn children. As a result of this pronouncement from God, the entire Christian New Testament must be rejected. Paul steals Dowd's titles and achievements and offers them to the fraud that is Jesus on the basis that the king was dead and buried. But that is not true. While Dowd would live by the rules of the Torah, many would die for opting out of its guidance. This process would begin with the product of Dowd's gross impropriety. The lesson was meant to scream, "I'll save you as my son when you return to the script. At that same time, I will impress upon you what happens when you write your own." That notwithstanding, because you spurned Yahowah, showing contempt for him in such an adversarial fashion, with enmity and rancor, with word and deed, this child who is born to you will absolutely die. There would be no life as a result of spurning Yahowah, of showing contempt for him. And God wanted to make that absolutely clear to Dowd. And as such, this is the case with every soul, conceived in impropriety, treachery, and death. It would have been inexcusable for Dowd to cherish and reward the product of his sordid affair, of his deadly behavior, of his betrayal. What they did was reprehensible. It cannot be rewarded under any circumstances. And if Dowd did not receive this message loud and clear, we would all be as good as dead. Now, if you say, well, then, if I'm extrapolating that, then you would say that the child of rape should die. No, I'm not. God doesn't know the rapist or the rape victim. In all likelihood, it would be exceedingly rare for either of them to be covenant, since covenant has included no one up to the previous 24 years and now is 1 in a million. No, they're not. Two people acting badly. That child has every reason to live. It is the child's fault. But this was no ordinary man. This is the chosen one. This is the Son of God. This is the Messiah and the returning King. And for him, under those circumstances, it was not appropriate. And so if Dowd didn't receive the message loud and clear, well, we wouldn't be here. God was uncompromising in this regard. The king's introduction is sufficient to tell us everything we need to know about what follows. This was what he wrote immediately after God dressed him down. He was angry. He was depressed. He was likely intoxicated, drinking way too much wine. He was thinking with the wrong head, as they say. He was out of his mind. What I'm going to share with you now is easily the most despicable song ever written by someone who is familiar with Yahowah. It will be hard to present this to you. And you're going to notice in this throughout, I'm copying an attitude. I am relentless. I will say every step of the way, what's wrong is wrong. I'm not going to take Dowd's side. Yahowah doesn't. I won't. Now, that said, my wife and I do intervene. This is one of the most important interventions of all of human history. I'm going to share the details of that with you as we move through this process. And it is an extraordinary finding in how all of that occurs. But at this moment, we had not yet done so. And we probably would not do so for the next decade. I think of the 14 years between this event and the end of Dowd's first of 3 lives. He just wallowed in misery. It was one mistake after another. I think it was during the last 4 years of this existence and then first 4 years of Solomon's reign, when Solomon took the throne. He was only 12 years old. He needed some parenting too. So this is before our intervention. It begins. To the Natsach, the enduring director, the eternal conductor, for the continuously supervised. It's a Mizmowr, a song, a psalm of Dowd. When Nathan, giving, the Nabi prophet, came to him regarding the relationship upon him pursuing after Bathsheba, promised daughter. Pretty clear when this one was first uttered. So looking at this with older and wiser eyes, there is another pertinent way to interpret the otherwise common La Natsach, enduring director introduction. La Natsach can also convey that this was written on behalf of the continually supervised, not just the eternal director, but it would be the eternal director continually supervising Dowd, one way or another. This would be consistent with the 89th Mizmowr, where Yahowah admitted that he would be constantly keeping watch on him. It is also the conclusion I drew from the last Mashal. The Amma and her Baal will be serving in this capacity, and we have in the past, and I think we will do so for at least the next 1,000 years, the blink of an eye in Yah time. So perhaps I'm prejudiced in this regard, but I'm put off by anyone begging for forgiveness. That's how religions work, but not relationships. Stop doing the things that irritate God and then focus on what pleases him. That's the solution. Stop doing what irritates him and then start doing what pleases him. Simple. Don't beg for forgiveness. God has delineated the path to him. Follow the path. Listen to what he says. Act upon it. It's real simple. He's not going to do something special for you. You could beg until you're blue in the face, and all it's going to do is irritate him. He delineated a specific process to earn his trust and to become part of his covenant family. Follow it, accept it, acknowledge it, agree with it, or don't. But don't pretend that God's going to make an exception for you, because he's not. And that even includes Dowd. God's consistent. He's dependable. He laid out the plan. Either accept the plan or don't. But don't beg God to change it just because you want him to. Come to grips with what went wrong and clear away the obstacles that led to the misadventure. Show that you have learned from the mistake by commencing corrective action. Sharpen your resolve and immediately re-engage in a productive way, better equipped and more resolute. I tell every friend that I've ever known who is going through an depressing circumstance where they think that the world has collapsed around them and they don't see any way out, and woe is me, and I just wish I wasn't even alive. And they just wallow in it. And I said, good grief, man. Stop it. Get out of yourself. The solution to depression is always the same. Get out of yourself. Stop doing what brought you into that situation and start doing things that are worthwhile. Focus on helping somebody else accomplish something worthwhile. Make your life count. The moment you stop wallowing in misery and start acting in a way that is appropriate, that is conducive and beneficial to others, your solution is before you. Your problem is solved. So, sharpen your resolve. Re-engage in a productive way. Always better equipped, more resolute, having been toughened up by having fallen, and proving that you can get back up and go again. Turn the failure into an opportunity to rise above it. Stop wallowing in self-pity. Simply foreclose on the ensuing depression by turning your failure into a teaching opportunity so that you and others learn the lesson and don't make a similar mistake. You're not the first person that failed. You're not the first person that's been disappointed. Get over yourself. Prove to yourself, to those who know you, and to Yahowah that you can stop being annoying and that you can get up and get going, lifting the tide rather than riding it out to sea. It really all gets back to Eden and to Adam. He climbed up in the tree and tried to hide within it rather than disengaging from that which was opposed to Yahweh's instructions. He begged for clemency by failing to be accountable. He not only failed to cease irritating God and failed to learn anything from his poor judgment, there was no attempt at all to improve, to get out of his own head and to do something that showed Yahowah that he could be trusted. Dowd was in the woe is me phase, begging for forgiveness rather than doing the things to earn it. If I've hurt your little feelings, I'm not sorry. This is a life lesson that would serve all of those on antidepressant medicines. Stop depending on chemicals. Stop depending on the psychiatrist. Stop wallowing in your pity. Stop being miserable. Do something worthwhile. You should choose to be merciful to me. He said, you should choose to be merciful. You should want to pity me while electing to favor me, because it's imperative that you remain inclined toward me. Chananani, you want to be kind to me because it is essential that you show me some compassion. Call imperative, second person, masculine singular. Elohim, God, in the manner of your loyal love, your unfailing kindness and deep devotion, your unwavering favoritism, and consistent with your compassion and tender affection. You must, or at the very least you should want to, blot out and wipe away my pesha, my rebellion and revolting defiance, as I breached the agreement, my hostile stance, my indignance and mutinous insurgency, as I reneged on my commitment and I rejected our alliance. Psalm 51:1. Dowd, at his best, is a master linguist. He uses the Hebrew language with great aplomb, particularly when it comes to moods. And for those who do not know, Hebrew is unique in that there are 3 volitional moods in the Hebrew language. The cohortative speaks of first-person volition. I want you to forgive me. I want you to be inclined favorably to me. If he had said that, that's fine. Wouldn't have mattered, but it would have been fine. First person expression of volition, the cohortative. That's not what this was. It was written in the imperative. The imperative can be, as the name suggests, a command. I'm ordering you, commanding you, demanding that you are merciful to me. Yeah, that's not going to work with God. The imperative mood is often used as a hypothetical with a possibility. Maybe you should consider, even though the odds are not likely or great, that you should treat me favorably. That's not good either, is it? And I'm here to tell you that while there are times when you can project on Yahowah his will, you can say, Yahowah, I know this is what you want to do. Because you've said so. And so you can project second person volition on God, but doing so in this circumstance and saying, you need to do this because of who you are, when I've been a jerk, no. So I want you to know that that's why I wrote this as I did. You should choose to be merciful to me. The imperative as volitional, the second person, wanting to pity me, same. While electing to favor me because it's imperative that you remain inclined to me, or at least demonstrate that possibility. And he says, Elohim, God. There's no problem using the title Elohim on occasion, but not in an opening request, not if you're projecting your impressions of what God should want on him. He has a name. Dowd knows it. Dowd uses it more frequently than anybody else. In this, the 51st Mizmowr, it's the only one where Dowd never mentions Yahweh's name. He is so full of himself, so lost, so depressed, so embarrassed, he won't even say Yahweh's name. It's Elohim. And that won't change all the way through. And then he is projecting all of this based upon what Yahowah will want to do or must do, even though it's Dowd's Pasha, rebellion, revolting defiance, because he's the one that breached the agreement. So as I've said, when it comes to the imperative mood, we have three options. It is either being used to issue a mandate, like a command, stating something that you're demanding, stating that which is imperative. It can be an indication of the will of the individual being dressed, or it can be a hypothetical, saying that there is a mere possibility, even though it's not a likelihood, that you're going to do this, that, or the other thing. However, in this case, all three approaches are not only wrong, they miss the point. It's Dowd who wants Yahowah to forgive and forget. To express that sentiment, he should have conveyed his plea in the cohortative mood, conveying first-person volition, his will. God has clearly stated his position on this, which is that he is exceedingly disappointed. He is disgusted. And that there would be no ongoing or immediate remedy, that the remedy was Passover 1,000 years from now, and that the consequence to Dowd and to his people would be severe. He's pronounced judgment. He's not saying, oh, well, let's just forget about that. I didn't really mean what I said. No, a God who forgives those who beg for it, it bears no resemblance to the God of the Torah. A God whose will is bent by the demands of men is a religious construct. You might like the way that sounds, but it's repulsive to the real God. Yahweh is not all loving, nor Is he always kind and merciful? I saw the big billboard at the Super Bowl halftime that, that love is the only thing that is more powerful than hate, and it conveys a largely inaccurate message. To love, one must hate. It's true. Hate is a virtue. You need to know who to hate, why to hate, when to hate. And if you don't, then you really can't be loving. It is essential that we hate what Dowd did: murder, rape. He had become an alcoholic. He was compromising everyone. He was leading an exceedingly deceptive plot. He was forsaking his responsibility as a leader of his people. We ought to despise that. The consequences were grievous. We ought to hate rape and rapists, incest and those who perpetrate it, pedophilia and pedophiles. We ought to hate those things. We ought to hate mass murderers, terrorists. If you don't hate those things that inspire universal bad behavior, like jihad, Islamic terrorism, then you're being merciless to the innocent. You're not being compassionate to them. And that's why Yahowah's not all loving. He can't be, and to be loving at all. If you're all loving, you're just fooling everyone. Because to love, you must hate that which is threatening to those you do love. And if Yahowah were all loving, there would be no purpose to life, no rules to live by, no guidance to gain from, no lessons to learn. We can choose to learn and to do the will of God, but we cannot impose our will on him. We do well to follow his advice and embarrass ourselves when we offload our counsel and requests on him. It's very seldom that I will say, God, you need to give me this. I want that. I don't have something or other. Occasionally I'll say, I don't get this. I would really appreciate it maybe if you'd lead me in the right direction. I can figure this out. I need a little help here. Or when things go awry in the midst of carrying out our mission, and I know he wants us to do a good job of conveying his testimony at this time, and something's come up that's making it very difficult, I'll come to him and say, I don't know the answer to this one. Help me. I'm sure you've written about it. Tell me where you've written about it, and I'll go translate it and try to understand it. But I'm not telling God to give me something that he's already committed to doing. Never ask God once to save me. It's superfluous. I want to do this job well, and I know the result of that. He laid out the terms and conditions of our being part of the covenant family, and I have met them. That means that it's a fait accompli. Why ask for that which he's already committed to doing? So in my view, just because our king had become pitiful did not mean that he engendered pity. Having shown none, he was currently the last person on the planet deserving compassion. Now I want you to think that through. God had just affirmed what I have told you. He said, because you showed no compassion, this is the consequence. So here's a man who had shown no compassion for anybody. And now he was begging for compassion. That's revolting. That's pathetic. So having shown none, he was the last person on the planet deserving of it. And to beg God for it is pitiful. I'm telling you, I love my king. And indeed, my surrogate son. And I will lay down my life for him. because I know the good outweighs the bad, the right triumphs over the wrong. But I'm going to be forthright because it's in his interest and yours to know when he's wrong. And I'm here to tell you that what I'm telling you now, I told him emphatically. So, since God shared this with us, since Dowd wrote these words, we're going to have a confrontation here now, and I'm not backing down. And by the way, he wouldn't respect me if I did. So the only thing in that opening statement that Dowd got right was Pesach. He had breached the agreement. He had overtly rebelled against Yahowah. His behavior was indignant. It was treasonous. It was mutinous. But it wasn't all in the past. He was still laying with Bathsheba. He was pining over the product of their treasonous and appalling behavior. He was lounging around all day feeling sorry for himself. It was so bad, Dowd couldn't even say Yahweh's name. So let's be clear, since our king's mind was muddled. Yahweh's Chanan, desire to be kind and supportive, wasn't on trial. He had not changed. While he wanted to show favoritism, it was Dowd who was precluding it. Yahowah had been extraordinarily chesed, loving and kind to Dowd. And he would be again after the intervention of the Amma and her Baal, Yada. And if it were not for his commitment to this chesed, beneficial relationship, Dowd would be dead. The fact he is still alive and the promise that he would never die is tribute to the fact that Yahowah remained chesed, deeply devoted to his wayward son, in recognition that they would accomplish something extraordinary together. And that would occur following the intervention that begins in the last Mashal and concludes in the 89th Mizmowr. Having not yet met with Leah and Yada, Dowd was confused. He believed that Elohim had some kind of a little magic wand, a super sponge, to blot out and wipe away rebellious episodes. But that is not how it works. A lesson he would learn and then facilitate in due time. Rather than blotting out and scrubbing away our guilt, it is bundled up and discharged. It's taken from us and deposited in Sheol, never to be seen again. Yahweh's Mashal solution renders us not guilty, rather than temporarily bathed and disinfected. There is no sanitizer for ongoing rebellion, and there is no divine bathtub. We do not dictate terms to God, and we accept his rules, or we write ourselves out of his will. Dowd's response to God imposing consequences on him was almost as bad as had been his behavior that led to his current plight. I think worse. He said, "It is imperative that you choose to intensely and to the full extent of your ability provide many ongoing," this is harbeh, "you must be sufficiently great to want to offer numerous and multiplied," Hifl, imperative, second person, masculine, singular, laundry services for me, where you are compelled to express your desire to wash me. You are commanded to want to cleanse and bathe me. Also in the imperative mood of my awon, my punitive consequence of my perversions and my corruptions for having bent and twisted the truth, of my guilt for having distorted what is right, becoming wrong, and from Chata'ath, my misleading ways, and for having gone astray, from me missing the way, forfeiting the relationship, and bearing the loss of being wrong, for me having led others astray. Well, at this point, we have the three of the four words that are used in Hebrew, and there's 7 if you consider the variations of ra, ra'ah, ra'ah. But Dowd just laid down the gauntlet and said, yep, I've got awon, I've got Chata'ath, and as a result of my pesha, my awon, my Chata'ath, well, you're compelled to provide ongoing laundry services. It's imperative that you express your desire to wash me. You must cleanse me because you want to restore me, making me all bright and shiny again. Dahar ani, it is imperative that your will become to purify me, brightening me to a sky blue color. Imperative, 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 imperative. Mizmowr song, Psalm 51:2.
Wow. He's got a brass set of cojones to say that to Yahweh.
Yeah, I don't think that is the, I don't think that's the way I would phrase it. I understand that it takes some courage to tell God what he must do. I think it's the alcohol speaking.
Yeah.
I think it's the depression screaming. I think it's the guilt raging. I love Yahweh. We have as a relaxed and personal relationship as two people, God and a person could possibly have. I don't put him on a pedestal. He is my dad, but he's also my boss. I fully respect that he is infinitely brighter than I am and better than I am in everything. But I know what he wants to accomplish, and I know that he chooses to work through people. And, I guess I was the only volunteer. And so we're committed to doing this thing together. And there are a couple of times where I've gotten, God, why would you allow this to happen? This is really frustrating. But I will guarantee you, I have never used the imperative mood. I wouldn't even think of it. So our king was telling God to provide maid services, as if running a laundromat for perverted souls. I'm not going to pretty it up. That's what he said. He was even dictating terms because the compelled laundry services would be ongoing, numerous, intense, and done with a smile. A happy ending. He was telling God he was going to do it and he'd like it. No. Those who are wont to claim that everything a prophet says must be true are oblivious to the obvious. I've tried to make this point before, and I've had all manner of pushback. Now, stop it. Dowd was wrong. This is written in the 51st Psalm. He was wrong. And God had told him so. And soon, so would Leah and Yada. Now, with every verb in the imperative mood, Dowd is either issuing commands to God, or he is dictating the will of God, or he is issuing a hypothetical. All wrong. Well, this should never have been spoken. The only way, at least it was, I can't even say honest. The only way it was, can't even say appropriately spoken. But if it had been expressed in the cohortative, at least he would be saying, this is what I want. Now, should you be curious, the king used the call stem twice, admitting that there was nothing nuanced in his demand. He deployed the hiphil stem to say that God had to treat him as an extension of himself, routinely doing this for him. Then the last two verbs were rendered in the peel, which is to say that Dowd would be the one to receive the benefit. And in fact, all of this has pertained to Dowd. The king isn't the least bit concerned about those whose lives he has ruined. Make no mistake, this isn't just about lustful killing. By rebelling against God and extinguishing the light of Yahowah over the titillation of adding an additional woman to his harem, Dowd opened the door that I have spent the last 2 decades trying to close. So you will have to overlook the fact that I'm upset. I have invested 10 years of my life closing the door that he opened through this horrible behavior and subsequent rant. Why? Because Dowd disqualified himself from being seen as the Son of God, as the chosen one, as the Messiah, as the returning King, and especially as our Savior. He trashed every wonderful thing Yahowah had to say about him and that Yahowah had promised to do with him, leaving God hanging and distraught. Dowd had become a dishonorable son, a bad husband, a worse father, a derelict defender of his people, a gluttonous king, a corrupt person, and a horrendous example. The consequence wasn't just unraveling of Yisrael and the torment of continuous death and destruction of his people, which he didn't give a damn about at the time. Yahowah says, because you have done this, Israel will never lay down the sword. It will be harassed for a very long time. He didn't give a damn. He didn't ask for the defense of his people. He says, me, take care of me. He wasn't trying to save anybody but himself. It's despicable. The consequence wasn't just the unraveling of Yisrael, because as a result of this sordid affair, Dowd made it easy. He made it inevitable for the Twistians and then the rabbis to renounce and to replace him. He had fallen and failed to recover at this time. And there would be no way to substitute. Had he not done so, I'm just telling you, had Dowd not made an absolute fool of himself, and he had not been despicable in every possible way, had he not fallen and failed to recover at this time, there would have been no way to substitute Jesus or Bikuwrym as replacement messiahs. The unrelenting demonization and resulting religion of Christianity, the betrayal of Jews by Judaism, and the resulting rabbinical Talmudic curse of Islam would never have occurred. There would have been no diaspora. There would have been no Holocaust. And Yahowah knew it, which is why he was so distraught. I want you to think that through. Because Dowd did this thing, knowing better, and then dug himself in even deeper. Everyone who has read this story recognized that he disqualified himself for every favorable thing that God had said about him, and that he left the religious wide open for a replacement Messiah, a better one, a new Son of God, a better one, an entirely different Savior. And the consequence for Jews, for Yehudim and Israelites, and for the world of Goyim, who would be lured away from God by those false messiahs. Devastating. Billions and billions and billions of people would die because of what he did. And now he was begging for personal forgiveness. Selfishly, I have a dog in this fight, because I was asked to devote better part of a decade, 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week, cleaning up the mess that Dowd had made. Explains why Yahowah was so eager to have me repudiate Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, comprising, a third of the total books I have written in the Yahowah series were composed to clean up this mess. 5 volumes of Twistianity, 5 volumes of goddamn religion, 3 volumes of Babel, all to clean up the mess that became inevitable because of what Dowd did. So yeah, I've got some skin in the game here. The serious advocates of these religions all know what Dowd did, and they readily justify the imposition of their counterfeit messiahs as necessary improvements. And that's why we have to deal with this. Rabbinical Judaism despises Dowd. They deny him as the Messiah. They deny him as the Son of God. They deny him as their Savior. They deny him as the returning King. Why? Because of this. As for God, Dowd put Yahowah in a terrible situation. If he failed to confront Dowd's Ra, Pasha, Awon, and Chata'ath, it's patently obvious that the king would have continued to act inappropriately and try to cover his tracks. He would never, ever have dealt with his departure from Yahowah and his Torah. He would have re-engaged, negating any possibility of fulfilling the Moedim. There would be no serving mankind or saving humankind. But by having done so, by overtly exposing and censuring his son, he gave the religious the rope to hang him. And they did. As for God, he did what came naturally to him. He confronted the problem head on. He excoriated his son. He remained true to his word and thus consistent. And then he went about resolving the issue his way. After full disclosure and open refutation, he deployed his Amma and her Baal, Leah and Yada, to represent him. And now, after considering my wife's advice, you are reading and listening to my rebuke. But please, I know this is harsh, but I want you to keep in mind, in the way that God has positioned Leah and myself, he is our son too. He stumbled and fell. But prior to that, the fact is he outperformed all of us. And after our intervention, he would do so again. He persistently contributed at an exceptional level for 48 years prior to this implosion. It's the most difficult job on earth. Yahowah tried it and didn't succeed. Moshe tried it and begged God to kill him. It was so hard. None of the prophets succeeded. None of them. This is the hardest job on earth, to be in the spotlight that God says, you're my chosen implement to convey my message to a world that doesn't want to hear from Yahowah, who despises him. There is no job more difficult. Dowd did it for 48 years prior to this implosion, and we need to keep that in mind. And more importantly, after our intervention, he fulfilled Pesach, Matsah, Bikuwrym, the toughest mission ever. Dowd more than made up for her failures because he fulfilled Chag Matsah. Once he came to recognize who he was, what he represented, and what lay before him in his second and third lives, he more than manned up. But at this point, he did not know any of those things. I was wrong when I told you that Dowd figured it out because I did. I told him. He completed the most physically, mentally, and emotionally demanding mission in human history, ultimately justifying every accolade and title. Do you know why I could tell him he was going to sacrifice his body being crucified by the Romans and then go into hell for a heavenly cause? Because I would make the same sacrifice. I could look him in the eye and say, you're not the only one. Me too. And I'm doing mine for you. He had done something horrible. But had he not recovered and reestablished trust with Yahowah, which was the purpose of our intervention, none of us would be here to listen to any of this. Capiche? So I'm in a position where I can scold him based upon what he did, based upon what he said. But no one else is. I've earned this right. I've earned this responsibility. It is my responsibility. I'm not going to shirk my responsibility. But anybody else that wants to criticize him ought to be careful. Because he is God's beloved. Because he invested 48 years in the spotlight, doing the most impossible job in the world. And then in his second of 3 lives, he allowed the Romans to crucify him to fulfill Passover. And then he carried our guilt into hell to save us. So don't go there. Know that it happened. Know that it was resolved. Know that with this appointment of this job and 24 years already invested, 32 by the time that Dowd returns, and 8 before I was born into this life, I have been given this responsibility and I'm not going to shirk it. So yes, I am openly and aggressively criticizing the king, Dowd, as did Yahowah. but I'm doing so because I love him. I would grow to respect him. I have a bromance with my son. I know how much he ultimately means to me, to you, and to God. I know he got up and got going in the most amazing way. So I have no issue when we're through this, restoring his luster, burnishing his resume, and reestablishing his reputation. And you're going to see that again as I present to you the 116th Mizmowr after this. And then I'm going to present the 89th from an entirely different perspective. And it serves as undeniable proof. But we're not there yet. So continuing with our lesson here and now, there are 4 Hebrew words, 6 if you consider their derivations, that are commonly, albeit inappropriately, rendered as sin. 3 of those were spoken by Yahowah in his dressing down of Dowd. They are Ra, evil neighbor, and malcontent countryman. Ra'ah, evil individual promoting that which is wrong, and Ra'ah with the hay, misleading and malignant shepherd. To these, Dowd has added Pesha, rebellion and revolting defiance by breaching the agreement. Awon, the punitive consequence of perversions and corruptions for having bent and twisted the truth. And Chata'ath, misleading ways, and for having gone astray. Now that we have defined the terms, Dowd is announcing that he is actually aware and continually cognizant of his pesha, of his violation of the agreement and breach of trust for having shown contempt for the word of God. However, there was no quick fix, no magic wand, no miracle mop to clean up the mess he had made. His follow-on statement is heartbreaking. The fact that he has Chata'ath forfeited the relationship for having led so many astray. Neged Tamid now defines who he has become. Past, present, and at least for some time into the future. Indeed, I myself am actually and continually cognizant of, aniyata. I am genuinely and habitually aware of and familiar with, call imperfect, my pesha, my rebellion, and revolting defiance for breaching the agreement and violating the trust. My Chata'ath, misleading ways for having gone astray, are conspicuously before me. They're beside me, all around me, closely corresponding to me because they continually proclaim what I have become. Neged Ani Tamid. They remain in plain sight right in front of me, ahead of me and trailing me, and clearly and constantly announcing and expounding upon who I have presently become. Mizmowr, Psalm 51:3. With Neged Tamid, Dowd has begun to see himself as the religious have positioned him, as too errant, too immoral, to be perceived as right. His notoriety precedes him, announcing who he had become long before his arrival. The problem wasn't going away, and things were going to get much worse before they would improve. But at least he had begun to yada. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't reveal that Tamid, continually, persistently, perpetually, is just one letter away from Tamym. The word misrepresented as perfect, without defect, unblemished, innocent, and blameless. This correlation between these words becomes even closer when we realize that the ym suffix on Tamim makes Tam a plural adjective, and Tamid continuing to be persistent, and Tamim, the word errantly rendered perfect, share the same actionable root, tamam. And therein is one of life's great lessons. Yahowah is not seeking perfection, as it would serve no purpose and it would be tragically counterproductive. If we were perfect, there would be nothing to learn, no way to grow, no opportunity for improvement, no capacity for us to be unique or interesting. God wasn't expecting or even desirous of perfection from Dowd or from any other man or woman. In fact, we're all better off when we make mistakes and stumble, when we fall, because we can learn from them. We can get up and demonstrate our resolve, forging our character along the way. Therefore, tamam and its derivatives, tamid and tamim, speak of having the fortitude to finish the job. Life is a test, and the passing grade is demonstrating that we're eager to be perceptive, reflective, responsive, and reliable. Listen, learn, engage, and then continue until the job is done. This is what the religious miss when they justify creating false messiahs to replace the imperfect one God is ultimately endorsing. He knows what they miss. Dowd fulfilled his mission. He completed the most difficult and demanding challenge that any man has ever faced. He endured crucifixion to open the door to life on Pesach, and he went into hell on Matsah to remove his guilt and ours. Therefore, my critique of him is because I, too, have a job to complete, and it includes reestablishing Dowd's relationship with Yahowah and then restoring his reputation with his people, because only then is the job complete. And in the present moment, prior to our intervention, the king simply doubled down on Chata'ath, going away and becoming misleading by using the verbal root. And then Dowd would add a dose of raw, evil ineptitude into the mix. But I think I've said enough for today. I'm going to conclude this program at this point. And we're going to pick this back up after an hour and 15 minutes tomorrow. I am, in one breath, sad that I have to expose my beloved son and our king in this way. And I am in the next honored to tell you he got back up, that our intervention prevailed, and that he reestablished himself as the chosen one. as the anointed Messiah, as the Son of God, our Savior, and returning King. And I want you to celebrate him as such. Thank you for listening.